Smoke billowed from under the hood of the motor car as Agatha sped into Southampton with 20 miles per hour, as fast as the automobile would go. As soon as we got close to the dock, she had to slow down because there was a huge crowd of people milling on the street in the plain, working-class town with its square brick buildings. Some were laden with bundles, trunks, and suitcases. Others carried nothing and probably came out simply to witness the maiden voyage of a reported wonder of the Titanic. "Oh heavens!" Mother cried. She caught sight of the immense ship on the docks. She was indeed a sight to behold. My first impressions of the gigantic tiered wedding cake, an enormous ocean liner boasted with white stacked decks above a great black hull and seemed to stretch on forever. At the very top were 4 large smoke funnels. It appeared to be as tall as the buildings in London or New York. The train station connected directly to the ship, and where cranes were loading cargo and trunks from the train directly onto the liner's cargo hold. "Maybe we're not too late, darlings," Agatha said as she sharply turned the steering wheel in the direction of the station. As soon as we arrived, I jumped out in the back and ran to the stationeer and asked if they were unloading cargo from the 9:30 train from Waterloo. He was told that the 9:30 train had already arrived and was unloaded. Before returning to the automobile, I stopped at a quick moment to let my heart slow down. It wasn't possible. We weren't going to reach Mimi or Blythe in time to stop them from leaving. I couldn't consider the possibility for even a second. I would fall to pieces. When I gave everyone the bad news, Agatha turned to the motor car back towards the ship and was again stalling in a thick crowd of people moving forward. Although the Titanic was supposed to be the most luxurious liner in all time, the people in the crowds were clearly not wealthy. The women's dresses were unstylish, and their hair disheveled. Some wore unattractive scarves and carried heavy bundles, while others tried to manage messy children. The men, too, were frayed, patched clothes. Agatha pulled the motor car aside and turned off, getting out. We struggled through the crowds on foot. Emma and Amelie and I were made better progress than Mother and Agatha. When once we paused to wait for them, Mother waved us forward. "Go, go," she shouted. "Try to catch them before they get on board." With much breath sucking and squirming past, even sometimes crawling under legs, my sisters and I finally reached the boarding gateway. The gangway led to the ship looked like the wooden bridges, the waist-high railings. Top gangways were occupied with rather grand-looking passengers. The middle gangways were less fancy passengers, and the lower ones packed with those people I guessed were third-class passengers. They were boarding the lower docks of the ships. We went to where the people were showing their tickets and having their names crossed off the list. I tried to get the attention of the uniformed pursuer at the entrance to the gangway, who was checking names, but I couldn't distract him from the task no matter how hard I tried. As an alternate, I looked at the uniformed officer, another seemingly junior pursuer, for he was not much older than me. With a clipboard, I asked if Mimi, Blythe, Onya, Taylor had boarded. He checked the passenger list and found their names. They're here, all right, on the ship already. First and second class have already boarded. Third class steerage passengers are going on now. I tried to impress upon him how urgent it was that I board the ship just to talk to them, but he insisted that it was impossible. I argued with him that I was of utmost importance. "Has there been a death in the family?" he asked in tone. It made it sound as he might accept this one reason to let us on board without a ticket. "Yes," Amma cried before I could even formulate into a response. "Our father has died." It was true enough. No one could fault her for lying. I quickly brandished an invented smile as Amelie subtly rolled her eyes as the lie. "Let me speak to my superior," he said. "Come with me." We followed him back to the man checking names and tickets. The junior pursuer instructed us not to distance off while he spoke with him. As they talked, the pursuer at the gate kept shaking his head, refusing. It appeared to let us on board without tickets. Emma tapped my shoulder, and I was too intent on watching the two men debate to take my eyes off them. It didn't look good. When we finally turned to say this to Emma and Amelie, they were gone. Casting a frantically looked at them, eventually spotting my sisters ahead. They somehow sneaked past, were on the gateway, and now stood shoulder to shoulder, their heads bent low. Almost impeccably, Amelie glanced over her shoulder and quicked her head, indicating that I should follow them. But how? I couldn't be too long about it, because one of the officers ended up the discussion, turned their attention back to the passenger liner. There was no getting past them. At the moment, the white-bearded man of military bearing in a white uniform had elapsed the captain's cap, walking past the two other white uniformed officers. That's Captain Smith, someone in the halted line realized. The line pushed forward, breaking form, and people tried to gain Captain Smith's attention with various questions. My moment, and I grabbed it. Ducking low, I scooted past the gateway. Just as I reached it, the line of people in the gangway moved forward. Others were adamant behind me. We've done it. We're on. Though we dare not reveal our victory for fear of drawing attention. Besides, the job was not done yet. We still had to find Blythe and Mimi. As we crept forward with the crowd, I craned my neck, scanning the upper gateways, trying to find Blythe and Mimi. When we went to the ship, people were busily trying to locate their rooms, crowding past one another in the narrow halls. I saw Astrud locking the gate, closing off the stairway, and would lead to the upper decks. Why are those being locked? I asked. Third-class passengers can't leave the steerage, he informed me. We must get up, I told him. Sorry, he said, looking none too sorry. Nodding, I took my twins' hands and moved them out of the stairway, hearing, We've got to find a gate that's still open. I say to them, Hurry, follow me. Nearly running, I rushed forward down the hall. When we were around the bend and out the steward's sight, I yanked the gate and revealed to find it had not yet been locked. We climbed the narrow stairways towards the upper decks until we came out, by mistake, because we had really no idea where we were going, onto the second-class outdoor walkway. The sign read, Second-class promenade, first and second-class passengers only. We were dressed better than most of the passengers in the steerage, and I hope that the fact that we enabled us to move freely into second class, where we might find at least Blythe. As we stepped onto the deck, I began to have second thoughts about our mission. It was almost inconceivable for the ocean liner would sink. It was so massive and sturdy. For it to plunge under the water, it would be as if the entire town had sunk under the ocean. I estimated the ship was probably bigger and contained more people than Spiritfail. Most of the people were not of the particular part of the promenade at the moment, though. We were at the back of the ship, and the others were crowded at the bow on the opposite side, waving goodbye. Standing there, my emotions began to spin wildly. Like so many other times in my past, I was torn, swept up in the conviction of Mother's panic. I had been so convinced that getting my sister up to the ship was the most important thing on the earth. But now, faced with the immensity, high level, and efficiency, and utter solidarity of the vessel, I had a feeling of being almost ridiculous and was beginning to descend upon me. It was a good feeling. A man walked by in a heavy overcoat with a cap pulled low on his face. I noticed him casually because the heaviness of his coat seemed excessive for the pleasant weather. Turning to Emma and Amelie, I was about to suggest that maybe we begin on the ship wasn't the best ideas, and that we should leave. But when I turned to them, both locked in the rigid fixation of the man in the heavy coat, and my mouth opened and his voice came out, though she seemed to barely moving her lips. It was a slightly higher voice than she used when Amelie was speaking through her. He's the one, she said eerily. He will bring the death to the ship. Beside her, Amelie had begun curling in on herself as she slowly sank to the floor, and her hands over her brow, her head bending into her chest. It was as if she were trying to pull herself into a ball. I swung my head back to get a better look at the man, but he was turning the corner and was out of sight. Everyone must leave the ship now, Emma cried, and she began to shake uncontrollably. Her eyes rolled back in her head until only the white showed. I don't want to die. I don't want to die, she screamed, and then she dropped suddenly as hard onto the floor. Bending over them, I tried to shake my sisters into consciousness. Come on, wake up, wake up. They didn't stir. I began to worry that Emma had hit her head badly. The young woman knelt beside me. She was Chinese. I help, she said, her English heavily accent. You wait, I get friend. She hurried towards the bow of the boat. It was probably only a few moments, but it seemed an eternity, and I waited there beside the unconscious twins. Finally, the young woman returned, hurrying in front of the young man in a tweed cap, pants, and jacket. His blue tie flew out to one side in the breeze as he walked in the flat, fast clip behind her. When my skin suddenly tingled, goose flesh forming on my arms. The young man hurried so quickly forward that the same brisk, purposeful walk. He had come closer. I blinked hard and into the sunlight at the young man. Had I fainted too? Was it a dream? It was Thad.